Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we interview experts from around the world on presentation skills, communication challenges, leadership, and what you need to do in order to get the results that you need when you show up in front of a group. My guest today is Pamela Cournoyer, and she is a community policing expert specialist. She's a conflict resolution specialist. And I wanted to ask her about how we can apply the conflict resolution techniques that she used in post-war Kosovo to the workplace. And so before I move into talking to Pamela, though, I'd like to invite you to take our free assessment. It only takes 4 minutes at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can find out where your speaking is getting great results and where a little bit of support could give you the recognition and the success that you're looking for. Pamela Cournoyer's bio is very impressive. She's been nationally and internationally recognized as a conflict management maven. She skillfully instills upper and middle management leaders to reclaim their disenchanted teams and their disenchanted workplaces. She's been successfully coaching and training high-profile leaders for over 15 years. It's fun to watch, actually, as Pamela awakens diverse audiences, including executives, teams, corporations, government, large and small businesses. Her clientele ranges from Nike, KPMG, to the Oregon State Police, the U.S. Department of Justice, and many, many other services. She brings to the table her extensive experience in professional consulting, executive leadership coaching, business coaching, executive coach coaching, leadership training, conflict facilitation, and DISC assessments. Her leadership forte marketing mindset, her boundary setting and advancing communications resolves conflicts, dynamic public speaking, and she raises her clients' life quality both at work and at home. It's truly transformational as she instantly shifts success blocking belief systems. These impressive gifts and talents make her a savvy catalyst for positive change for any organization. And now, on to the interview. Pamela Cournoyer, thank you so much for joining us on Speakers Who Get Results. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm so glad we found each other. It took us a while to get this organized, and yay, you have some really interesting things that I want to ask you about, mostly because workplace conflict is something that I'm not very good at. I grew up in a family where you didn't say anything, you just stuffed it down. And it took me years to learn how to deal with it. And so I'm always interested in learning from people who are really good at managing these sorts of things. But before we get into your story and all of that, the question I ask all my guests is, if you could have a dream interview, an interview with somebody from history, someone who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
Oh, who it would be? It would be Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
I just have so much respect for that man. Just incredible. So I just feel like when Abraham, it's kind of like the E.F. Hutton. When E.F. Hutton speaks, everyone listens. The
Hmm.
room stops. And a lot of people argued with him. A lot of people disagreed with him. And yet he motivated people and he got people to vote for something that they didn't even want to vote for. And he just seemed like he was such a wise man with so much conflict in his world and in his life. So I just would love to, I would love to learn more about just, I want to really more follow him around and listen to what he does than even interview because he's going to model it. And the modeling is the fun part. I'd love to see him have a bunch of people throw things at him and see how he handles it.
It's funny. I'm always thinking about how we get there and wondering what Abraham Lincoln, the actual person, was like, since
Yeah.
as opposed to the sort of the saint who's portrayed in the history books. I'm always curious about that.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to be able to peek, not that, not going to destroy, see the clay feet of the saint, but I'm always curious about that.
That's why I believe that he lived in so much conflict and he had so many enemies, including in his own family, that for this man to lead a nation when he had so much conflict around him, and yet I mean, he would get in arguments with people easily. He was an attorney. Hello. He always had an opposing side. And yet our country did what he suggested that they do. And he is
Yeah.
now marked and modeled as a great man. Well, there are lots of people who are great leaders. The reason why they're leaders is they did something different.
Mm-hmm.
They were not status quo. So
Mm-hmm. And when they made a speech, they got a result. He got
they
people
did.
listened. Yeah.
They did.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Pamela, one of the things that's really interesting about you is that you were invited to go to Kosovo after the war to help resolve conflicts. And this now informs your work with corporations. At least most of the time, please God, we are not actually shooting at each other at work most of the time. But
Sometimes.
sometimes, right. How did you get involved in conflict resolution? And tell us a little bit about what it was like to come in post-war. Was the war really over even?
No, no. When a war is over, that just means that the officials fighting has stopped, but it doesn't mean that they've lost their feelings or they aren't anxious about the people that are around them or what could happen next. They're just in a place where they don't have to set up a gun and everybody knows it.
Mm-hmm.
There was so much propaganda when I was in Kosovo that was being infiltrated into communities to continue the war,
Mm-hmm.
that it was really an interesting job just to go in there and talk to people and say, so let's look at this. Did your neighbor really say that? Or
Uh-huh.
is this what the propaganda said?
And for those of our listeners who are not familiar with the details or who have forgotten the details, can you just give us like the 3-sentence outline of who was fighting and for what?
There were Serbians and Albanians who lived together in the same country. And the Serbians usually took all the leadership roles and the Albanians took the servitude roles.
Mm-hmm.
So the chiefs of police would be, for the most part, Serbian, and then the police officers would be Albanian, or the judges would be Serbian, and then the court clerks would be Albanian. So it just seemed like there was an imbalance of power in the country. And as civil rights starts rising up and all over the world, and this is Pamela's take, okay? This is not, what you'd probably read in the paper. As civil rights started happening, Albanians started saying, wait a minute, there's some injustice here and there's some imbalance.
And what year is this now?
I don't really know the year. I know I went in 2004 and houses were still smoldering.
Okay.
So I'm assuming 2002. It was when Clinton was president. So when I went in, I had language assistance and great assistance, But the challenge was that Albanians and Serbians were neighbors and had always lived together, but there was propaganda floating around that was still telling the Serbians that the Albanians were plotting against them.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we would go in and do this training, they would literally, when they first came in, the Serbians would sit on one side of the room, the Albanians would sit on another. And our goal was to have them do a lot of team building exercises. So we just kept incorporating them. They had to work together. Pretty soon we have them laughing and running around the room and having a great time and being the neighbors that they were.
Mm-hmm.
There were moments when they would forget. And then we would bring them around and say, okay, this is what these people really are like. They're people just like you. Each of us are the same people. I mean, we have the same feelings, not the same people.
Mm-hmm.
We,
And who invited you? Who sent you over there? How did you get onto that
the
list?
The Department of Justice did this thing through this organization called ICITAP, which is it was an investigative leg or arm of the Department of Justice. And I went in under the UN, the United Nations.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a contingency of Americans, but we worked with people from Germany and people from Zimbabwe and people from Sweden. And I mean, it was all over the world, whoever was part of the UN effort. So there were military stations. I remember going to the French cantina and having some of the best food I've ever had. Because they had French army that was there just to keep the peace. And at one point we were not escorted, we were rushed out of a restaurant and they bombed it right after we left. I mean, literally.
Oh boy.
So we had armed guards around us frequently just to do the work because we were trying to bring the people back together and get them to work together.
So how did you were trained as a community policing conflict manager?
Yeah, specialist.
Okay.
Mm.
What made you realize that experiences in getting warring people to talk to each other was also applied to the workplace, where it's actually a lot more subtle, but still could be war?
Yes. I think probably the biggest dawning was when we would give team building exercises and we would assign people to be on teams. And of course, we're walking around and we're sort of pushing them to work together, is that they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
People don't really want to be mad at people all day. They don't want to hate people. They don't want to live in hatred. We feel better when our dopamines, are going and on our endorphins rather than being angry and it releases something totally different in our bodies when we're smiling. So everybody inside really wants to get along. It shouldn't have. And sometimes we just have this story that's running through the back of our head that prevents us from being real. I mean, from really being able to connect.
Okay, so now I get to ask you some very specific questions about how do we deal with this. You're certainly plenty credible. When you've got employees or people who are working for you, I work with a lot of female leaders, women who are either running companies or running divisions or running departments, and people are acting out. How do you get them to stop? You said something about the dreaded drama triangle.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I don't think anything just starts. There's always a place. There's always an event that happens that causes a conflict. I mean, we don't hire people who come in like this.
And arms folded, etc.
Exactly. We hire people who have a smile, who are engaged. Usually people have like 6 months. I know I did many jobs where I had to prove that I really was a credible person and I wanted to work with other people. And so it's like, here's this wonderful person. And then a year and a half down the road, they turn into an old sourpuss. It's like, what happened? But usually there's an event. And if that event didn't get handled, then that person is going to continue to cause more conflict. And other people will start making their opinions and their judgments. And then it starts dividing companies. So that's one of the first things I have people do is look for the event. What was it that happened? And 99% of the time people go, raise their hand and they say, oh yeah, I remember. It's when so-and-so put in for a new position or a raise, and we didn't give it to them, but we gave it to this other person. And there's the conflict. It's going to be that simple. And now they don't think that the company did them wrong, that they deserve better than this. And they didn't feel the other person. Now they're going to resist that new person in leadership because they didn't get their job. I mean, it just goes on. I mean, have you seen that, Elizabeth?
Oh, yeah. Over and over again. For that matter, there have been a few times in my career where I was done bad too. And I remember every detail. People who lied about me and sabotaged me.
Yes.
And most of the time I'm sort of like, I'm a fairly happy person and, don't lose my temper often, but there are a couple of times where people told lies about me and I lost a job. And yes, and I remember every detail. So yes, I try not to dwell on it, but I remember. Yes.
So if we can, we clear up the event. If we can clean up that event, that is really going to help reduce the conflict and help that person regain themselves and come back and literally meld back into the workplace. If that does not work, then another thing is that I talk about is the drama triangle, which is where you have the victim, oh, I've been done wrong too. You have the persecutor who says, if you weren't a better this is the attitude, this is the why we didn't hire you and put you in this new position in the first place. So that's the persecutor. And then there's a rescuer who stands between them and says, oh, wait, they're really a good person. They really didn't mean it. You really should reconsider them. Let's just all take this to the table. And all three of them are all victims. The person who had this happen to him was like, I put their hand, as the back of their hand is glued to their forehead with a always woe is me look. And then there is the persecutor who's pointing their finger at the other person. And then there's a rescuer that puts their arms out to try to stop what's going on between the persecutor and the victim. The thing is, the rescuer, which is generally most coaches or anybody who likes to help people, that's their downside. So we have to replace it with something different, something that's not going to rescue people, because usually a rescue happens when nobody asks for permission. You just do it. You just step in. You just fix it.
Yes, just fix it. Got it.
You just fix it. And the victim never sees a way out. They just stay in victim. And the persecutor feels like they've so taken advantage of them. They bent over backwards and they did all these things that they just start disliking that person. Well, here's the real fun part of the drama triangle is I want you to put it on a pinwheel and pretend like you can spin it. So at any given moment, I can be the victim, I can be the rescuer, or I can be the persecutor. It just goes around. People step into those roles all the time. So if I didn't get the job, I'm the victim. But then I hate the person that did get the job. So now I'm the persecutor. And then somebody says something that's really nice about somebody else. And again, I'm the persecutor. I'm angry. But there might be a moment when I rescue myself and say, yeah, but I did really well too. I did all this. In fact, I had 5 more degrees than that person did. So I don't understand. So there's just, you see, it's just a continuous thing. And the best thing you can do, stop, get off the triangle. Stop being a victim. Stop rescuing people. Stop persecuting.
And that, of course, is where you need someone from the outside, because it's so hard to see it from the inside.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It really makes a difference. And then we have one more piece on top of this, is that if we want to be really healthy with it, then the victim becomes the creator. What do you really want? And we work from that place. And if I can get my victims into that place and say, because, we work with people all the time, they're frustrated that things aren't going their way. Their career is not going the way they want it to go. People are talking about them. So how do you become the creator? What is it that you want? Well, I want people to like me. Okay, so what do you think is going to happen? Well, I just have to give in. Well, let's talk. Because giving in means that they're just rescuing everybody else. They're not living.
Yeah.
So we talk about that. How can you be a creator? A persecutor. We have them become the challengers. So what could you do? How could we do this differently? If you want this position, which I think, you have all the qualifications for. So here's what I see is missing. What are you willing to do to get that place? Because I'd like to give you that job.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see you there.
Okay.
So that is a challenge. They're challenging them to step it up in a way that's positive instead of you are, no pointing fingers.
So if you find yourself, say, managing
Uh-huh.
a group where this is happening, there's got this drama triangle going, how can you recognize that that's what's going on instead of that person just being horrible? Or how can you recognize if, say, you as a manager have unconsciously played a part in the situation?
Yes. Well, you asked the right question, Elizabeth, because usually managers are asked to be rescuers.
Okay.
This person won't work with us on this project, and this project is due tomorrow, and they won't do X. Joe is not going to work with Jane. And so they go to the manager and they say, manager, help. You step in, it's your job.
Yeah, right.
So they want the manager to do a rescue. So a typical rescue is, okay, Joe and Jane, you get in the office right now. We're going to talk. So they try to, get the two to work together and all that. And that's a rescue. One person asked them to do it. The other person didn't want it. They're upset. They're angry. So if you instead become the coach, which is what we do,
Yeah.
and you help that manager figure out, how do I step out of the triangle? How do I see that this is a triangle, that they're wanting me to fix this, and it's not my job to fix it. My job is to do my job and to oversee them and empower people to solve their own problems. So how can I empower that person to solve this problem, to be a creator, to maybe challenge that person to do a better job instead of step in the middle and do the rescue?
What if the victim is really in love with their victimhood?
Which many are.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got the V, we're in victimhood. And we've got the sweatshirt.
Yeah, right. Well, what if the victim refuses to admit that they had any part in creating the situation?
Yes. Well, usually victims don't think they're innocent. Again, part of this is figuring out what is it that you want. And if you can
You,
help
the manager, you mean?
You, the manager, help that you're coaching the victim. What is it that you want? Well, I want so-and-so to stop bugging me. Okay, so if they stop bugging you, then what would happen? I would just keep following it until they become, what we're doing is we're pulling the creator out of them. And sometimes it's really painful because it's drop by drop. At the same time, after a while, they're going to figure it out. Once you've got somebody and they can see that they've been in the victim place, it changes. They change. They get it. It's just helping people see it. And sometimes, I go in and I do a training so everybody can see what the drama triangle looks like. So it's not just for managers, but it's for everybody to see. Here's the drama triangle. Here's what that looks like. And here's how we play it. And I do it with the donut holes. Somebody stole my donut holes. What do I do? And the manager steps in and says, oh, I'll just buy you new donut holes. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And the persecutor says, you're always losing your donut holes. You never did it. So we have people trade places in that triangle. We have them literally role play. And anyway, I just have a lot of fun with it. But there's ways you can do it so people are laughing and then they finally raise their hand and say, oh my gosh, I live in this. It's all over the world.
I have a whole list of questions here for you. Can you boil all of this down into maybe 3 ways? Just give us like a list of 3 bullet points that we could truly focus on, because clearly they're not going to be able to get through this in the course of one podcast episode.
I hear you.
Where could one start? If you find yourself with this sort of situation at work, where could you start to untangle it?
The first place that I tell everybody to start building awareness. If you know what the drama triangle is, you want to become aware. What is happening? All of a sudden, I'm feeling like people are picking on me. I'm angry. Then you have to stop and become aware that, okay, I just stepped into the drama triangle. I don't know that there's any time that when we get angry that we're not stepping into a victim or persecutor role or rescuer. I just think it's, so when you're angry or frustrated or hurt, that's your number one tool. Be aware. Okay, I just stepped into the drama triangle. The second one is you stop and drop the role. If you can just stop being the victim and you drop the role, you just say, okay, I want to yell at you and tell you what a terrible job you did, or how you never show up for these meetings on time, or whatever it is. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to step into that role, because then that person says, yeah, but I had 5 phone calls and they were phone calls that you put on to me. And you did, so it just starts the triangle. So if we can stop and drop our roles after we've become aware that we are in them, that is the second one. The third one is to shift and to change into the new role. It's like we put on the new role. So I become a creator. And ultimately, what is it that I really want that would be beneficial for everyone? And the persecutor becomes a challenger. How can I challenge this person to a higher level? And the coach is, what kind of questions, how can I be supportive to them to help them step into creator? Everything is about getting everybody into a certain level of creator, but depends on where you are in the triangle in that moment. Wow. So we're going to want to be a rescuer. So it's like, okay, I got to be the coach. I want to persecute that person. Okay, I need a challenge. I want to say, oh, woe is me. So I need to think about, what do I want? What am I missing?
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's Pamela Cournoyer. This is amazing. And clearly this is a huge topic. So a lot we can do, a lot we can learn from you. How can we find out more from you?
Well, actually, I have this really cool tool. It's called Conflict in the Workplace Identity Tool. And it's not about the drama triangle so much as it's helping you figure out where your dramas are really starting, where the issues start. So it's kind of like, how do I figure out what is going on? And in this identity tool, I help people name their conflicts, and then they investigate further where they're coming from, who's involved in it. We're just sort of laying the scene to the play, so to speak. And then we identify where they fit. Do they fit in a people section? We usually think it's all people, but it's not. Is it data or is it environment? And then I give some examples of it and say, here's what this looks like. And once people kind of figure out where that is, and they go back and listen to the conflict, say, okay, I need to drop the role, or I need to step into this, or you can Google drama triangle. Yeah. There are so many videos, so many things about it. This is certainly not my drama triangle. It's Karpman's drama triangle.
Well, how do we find about your identity?
The identity tool. Okay, so it's Powerful and True is my website. POWERFULANDRUE.com/ID tools.
ID tool. Okay, great. I will put a link for that into the show notes. But this is fascinating, and I'm going to have to ask you. I'm going to call you lots more times, because to get more advice about how to deal with these things, just really, I think about some of the times where awareness made me actually stop a habitual behavior.
Yes.
Yeah. Like
Yeah,
way
it's been
back,
really fun.
way back when conversation with my mother where I realized, wait a minute, I know where this conversation is going. We've had this conversation a
Yes.
million times. And we were on the phone and I said,
Uh,
I know where this conversation's going. I'm going to step off the cycle, just say, I love you. And I hung up. And she was horrified. She called both my sisters. She hung up on me. She didn't want to finish the conversation, So that's, I think maybe for next time I talk to you about what happens if someone is not willing to step out of that.
well, they are usually they aren't. So this is all good. We just still, if you step off your role, then you're no longer in the triangle. And
So
that's the first place you have to go.
I'm just not going to play.
Yeah.
Not
just
going to
don't
play this game. Yeah.
Another one is don't pick up the rope, in a tug of war.
Wow.
Drop it. If you picked it up, drop it.
Well, Pamela, this has been really wonderful. I'm so glad and honored to have you as a guest on Strategic Speaking for Results. There will be all sorts of information in the show notes for this. So please subscribe to the podcast if you aren't already. Check us out on YouTube. And if you're curious of how your presentation skills are strong and where maybe you could use a little help, take my free 4-minute assessment at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where you're strong in your presentation skills and where a little support might give you the results and the recognition that you need. This has been Elizabeth Bachman. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.